Hi, guys, and welcome to the Real Wellness Podcast, the podcast designed to help you heal holistically and give you the tools that you need to thrive. We're making it easy to understand medicine and wellness with practical steps from the experts, one podcast at a time. Our one request is that if this podcast helps you live just a little bit better and more aligned, that you'll leave us a review and share this podcast with a friend. That's all we ask so that we can keep this free and keep giving you the tools that you need to optimize your life and to thrive. Today's guest, we have Dr. Guthrie, who went to medical school at Loma Linda, is a board-certified family physician. He spent 20 years of service in the Air Force, including the rank of retired colonel. Dr. Guthrie is certified in functional medicine and part of the first class to complete the program. His goal in patient care is to help individuals recognize what the root problem of their chronic diseases, to understand how they can reverse those causes, ultimately leading to the reduction or elimination of the disease. We're so excited to have Dr. Guthrie join us again on an episode of Rare Wellness. We're really excited to talk to him on a topic that impacts literally everyone, the topic of sleep. So we've already interviewed you before, Dr. Guthrie, but thank you for coming back on.
Hi, yes. Good to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed our conversation so much last time, and I'm really excited to explore the topic of sleep. But before we get into it, each podcast we ask the guest, what is a wellness tip that you've been loving recently? Has there been something that you've just been incorporating in your life? I know last time you mentioned intermittent fasting. Have you had something that you've been really into wellness-wise recently?
Yeah, it's the huge advantage that can be gained with a short amount of time using high intensity interval training as the core of your exercise program, at least the aerobic part of it. You can literally exercise at maximum effort for 4 1-minute sessions with 5 minutes of rest between every other day and have the cardiovascular response equivalent of running 15 miles a week. That
That's
sounds
insane.
crazy. It sounds crazy, but there's a number of really good studies illustrating how that works and why it works, and including muscle biopsies and VO2 max measurements, all kind of
So
scientific
you've been
data.
doing a lot of HIIT workouts recently.
Well, yeah, so for me, it's very simple. I have a long driveway that's fairly steep. I go to the bottom and I run as hard and as fast as I personally can. It doesn't look fast to anyone else, I'm sure, but for 60 seconds, at which time my heart rate is usually up around 150 to 180, and I feel like I'm going to fall down. And then I slowly, with no effort measurable at all, walk back down to the bottom and make sure 4 to 5 minutes has passed, and then do another 4 of those every other day.
The same benefits as 15 miles. I'm shocked.
15 miles running a week. Right.
That's incredible. Okay, well, that is super cool. We're going to have to dive into that some other time. But since we're talking about sleep today, let's just go ahead and dive right into the topic. What does healthy sleep look like?
Okay. Healthy sleep is actually, let's back up one step before that. Let's talk about why sleep matters. Because a lot of people think that, oh, I do fine with 4 hours of sleep a night. That's all I need. Go all day, drink a little coffee, and it's all good. There's good solid evidence that sleeping less than 6 hours a night of healthy sleep, not just sleep, but healthy sleep, less than 6 hours a night has a similar long-term mortality and chronic disease risk as smoking 1 pack of cigarettes a day. Actually, it is now common in sleep literature to call sleep the new smoking.
Wow. Sleep is the new smoking. So, okay.
Right. So this is critical. It has to do with preventing Alzheimer's disease, because while you're asleep, your brain is clearing out all that junk that is accumulated in the day. And when I say junk, I mean chemicals and debris that, if it doesn't get cleared out, begins to accumulate and creates the scenario ready for dementia to take place earlier than it would need to. Similar effects on your heart, on your blood vessels. Yeah.
Okay, so sleep matters. But
Yeah.
what is healthy sleep? Like if I sleep
Okay.
6 hours of night, is that enough for me?
Right. So many people think they have a sleep problem when really they don't. The most common complaint I get in the office actually is, Doc, I'm not sleeping well. I'm awake 5 times in the night. And so I always begin talking about sleep with normal sleep. Normal sleep is that you lay down in bed, you close your eyes, you relax, and you fall asleep. And you do one sleep cycle. It has stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's different EEG activities in your brain, different movement or not movement things that happen in each cycle. But at the end of one sleep cycle, you wake up. Everyone does. You can't not wake up between sleep cycles. So the sleep cycle lasts about an hour and a half when you begin a night's sleep. And by the time morning comes around and you've had your 8 hours average of sleep, they're running about 40 to 45 minutes in length. So to wake up 4, 5, maybe even 6 times a night is actually probably representative of normal sleep if when you wake up, within 10 or 15 minutes, you're back asleep again. So, unlike most people who talk about sleep from a lay perspective, many of them talk about, well, let's not look, I want you to not look at the clock because looking at the clock can get you all anxious and weirded out and prevent you
You're
from
talking
falling back.
about when you're falling asleep. You're saying when you wake up after a sleep cycle, you're saying
Right.
don't. Okay.
Right. When you wake up in the middle of the night, I recommend you first thing you do is look at the clock. If the clock registers at least 45 minutes longer later than when you last looked at it, you actually have just completed a sleep cycle in all likelihood. Um, it may feel like you've been laying there thinking and tossing and turning, but I don't really know many humans who can lay eyes closed for 45 minutes at a stretch.
So you're
And
saying if you think you haven't fallen asleep, like if you wake up in the middle of the night, 45
Mhm.
minutes have passed, your eyes have been closed, and you think you haven't fallen asleep, you probably have. Is that what you're saying?
Right, and what's most useful at that point in time is to just say, "Oh, great, I'm between sleep cycles. I think I'll get up and go pee because then it's easier to fall asleep, and I'll just go start my next sleep cycle." And that right there has resolved insomnia complaints for probably 20 to 30% of the patients who've come to my office complaining of sleep problems.
So is it possible that the anxiety related about I can't fall asleep can actually make it worse to fall asleep?
Oh, absolutely. And being anxious that you are awake and it's dark keeps you awake, which is a good segue, perhaps, from normal sleep into talking, let's say, about adrenaline.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the Premium Center for Regenerative Medicine and Stem Cell Therapy in the Northwest, Northwest Center for Regenerative Medicine. Get back to the activities that you love without needing surgery. You can book your appointment at nwc4rm.com. Again, that's nwc4rm.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Rare Wellness Supplements. You can head over to rareplanethealth.com to get your supplements. My personal favorite is the premium fish oil filled with omega-3s. Again, you can go to rareplanethealth.com and get the supplements that you most need to support your health and wellness today. Lastly, this podcast is also brought to you by Rare Wellness. Rare Wellness is located on the South Hill in Spokane and is one center that provides all the wellness tools that you could need. Whether you're looking for a hands-on premium intimate yoga studio with a therapeutic emphasis, bar classes, tai chi classes, if you're looking for skincare treatments, injectable, hydrofacial, microneedling, organic spa treatments, if you're wanting to get therapeutic massage or book functional medicine appointments to get down to the root cause of your inflammation, Rare Wellness is the place for you. Whatever your wellness needs are, they have it covered. So to book your appointment today, go to rarewellness.com. Again, go to rarewellness.com and mention this podcast for 10% off when you're booking. Okay, time to get back to the episode. Can you talk to me a little bit just about duration of sleep? Like how long should I be sleeping?
The standard amount of sleep that is thought to be a healthy one, if you want to take a single number, is 8 hours. But the range is
Regardless
from
of age, regardless of sex, gender.
Well, not entirely regardless. Young children need more sleep to have healthy brain development than do adults. And the elderly often need a bit more sleep and have more difficulty sleeping at night. So they often end up napping during the daytime. But from, from age 12 through probably 80, anyways, 8 hours is a really good number to aim for.
Hmm. So healthy sleep looks like 8 hours of sleep. You wake up feeling rested. If you wake up during the night, that's not necessarily a bad thing, is what I'm hearing you say. Any other characteristics of healthy sleep, or is that?
Well, yes, and actually it's really more a description of unhealthy sleep. If you have had to use a drug, whether prescription, over the counter, or possibly even herbal substances, to force your brain to sleep or to make you drowsy, then most likely the sleep structure, the four stages that I talked about, are not normal. So your Ambien, which maybe is better named Zombian because it actually doesn't increase sleep, it increases amnesia for having not been asleep. But sleeping medications, alcohol, um, antihistamines like Benadryl, Somanex is the over the counter version of that. Those drugs actually change the sleep structure, and you lose most of the benefit of your sleep because of the changed structure of sleep.
So you should not have to rely on taking over the counter drugs to fall asleep. And if you are, it's probably an indicator that your sleep is unhealthy.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Mhm.
So let's segue into adrenaline, like you were talking about earlier. How does adrenaline affect sleep? Uh, Caffeine. How do you shut off your brain? How does adrenaline affect your sleep?
Right. So I like to kind of approach this as what are ways you could screw up your sleep if you really wanted to? Um, kind of taking a backwards approach to the question. Adrenaline is a normal neurotransmitter in your body that's designed to prevent you from going to sleep at all. It's that thing that helps you escape the tiger, and falling asleep while a tiger is chasing you is in general a bad idea. So it wakes up the brain. It does a lot of things. If you've ever had a good fight or argument right before bed, you know what I'm
It's
talking
hard to
about.
fall asleep. Yeah, I
Yeah,
know when I've had an argument with someone right before I go to sleep, it's way difficult.
right. And depending on if you're a fast or a slow metabolizer, that effect might last 20, 30 minutes. It might last 4 hours. If you're a slow metabolizer, it can really have a major effect. So, in the category of adrenaline, I put a number of things. The first one we just mentioned, save or defer arguments till the morning, not having those right before bedtime.
Have you ever
If
heard have you ever heard of the I sorry to interrupt you, but I've heard the saying, I grew up with the saying, don't ever go to bed angry, which is interesting because I've always thought it's better to argue it out before you go to sleep. But you're saying that that's not the best way to do it. Save it for the
Well,
morning.
not if you want to fall asleep. It's not the best way to do it. And yeah, and there is an interesting text in Scripture that says, "Do not let the sun go down on your anger." It's actually health advice as regards sleep and rest, and what happens if you're churning adrenaline and cortisol during the night when you're supposed to be doing exactly the opposite.
So, what about working out? Does related to adrenaline? Is working out close to bad time going to spike my adrenaline levels and then keep me from being able to fall asleep?
That's probably the most complex one of the factors that's worth considering. If you exercise vigorously, a good hard aerobic workout, 2 to 4.5 hours before bedtime, then yes, it will keep you awake. It'll make it more difficult for you to fall asleep that night. However, if you are laying there first thing going to bed and having difficulty falling asleep, getting up and doing a brief course, 10, 15 minutes of vigorous exercise, push ups, sit ups, jumping jacks. When you go to bed, you will actually then have an endorphin rush. It's sort of like taking a little bit of narcotics, and it will help you go right to sleep. Um, and we don't tend to see after that sort of sleep induction a 2 or 3 hours later a greater difficulty falling back asleep. That doesn't tend to happen.
Okay, so the last thing was if your bedtime is 10 p.m., you're going to want to stop. Okay. Yeah. If you just,
Yeah, you want to stop your vigorous exercise, have it completed by about 6 p.m. And it's a matter of day planning. You know, what does your planning your day out such that you get your exercise earlier in the day, not in the not in that 2 to 4 hours right before bed. Now, if you have no trouble sleeping, you're falling asleep and you have great sleep, you don't take anything to sleep, and you're waking rested. If you have what we've described as normal sleep, well, exercise whenever you want. It just if you're having trouble, here's the things to look at.
so I've noticed, especially when I was in college, I would catch myself in this pattern of waking up, using an energy drink before I would go and do my workout, getting coffee later on in the day, and then needing to take a bunch of melatonin at night to fall asleep. And of course, my sleep suffered. But what do you have to say about just like, do you feel like with the amount of dopamine hits that we get from scrolling on our phone or just the way that we structure our lifestyle in general, like how necessary is it to quit some of those habits? Can you have good sleep and do those things, or is it just impossible?
Well, can you have good sleep and do those things? I have to rely on my patient's honesty. And I have had some patients who, yes, say that they describe a completely normal sleep life and are consuming caffeine throughout the day. Um, those people probably have tuned out already and aren't watching the podcast, right?
They're like, I sleep
So,
fine. I don't need this.
right. But the fact of the matter is, if you've dosed caffeine, even if you sleep well all night, your sleep structure is different than it would have been had you not been sleeping with caffeine. And when we get to melatonin, we're going to talk about some importance that has little to do with how well you're sleeping, but has to do with how well you are repairing all of the worn out, broken parts of your body that you've managed to ding up during the day. Uh, but we should save that for when we discuss melatonin. So, in terms of caffeine, acts like adrenaline. It's supposed to keep you awake. Um, Many people use caffeine because caffeine gives them energy, but it actually doesn't give energy.
Explain
Scientifically,
that. Explain that a little bit.
caffeine,
Just briefly, since,
caffeine,
yeah.
caffeine relieves the withdrawal symptoms neurologically of a caffeine addiction. Okay? The
Got it.
primary symptom of caffeine addiction is fatigue. So, what caffeine will do is take you from a withdrawal fatigue back up
Mm.
to your normal baseline no caffeine energy level. That's what it will do.
So caffeine is not actually giving me a boost of energy like I think it is. It's just taking me back to the baseline level of where I would have been if I would have never started using caffeine in the first place.
Correct. And I've had a number of patients validate this in their personal experience. It takes about 6 weeks to withdraw from the fatigue effects of caffeine. So recognize it's not just the 3 day headache you're talking about. No,
Right.
it's
So when I
six
quit coffee, it'll take 6 weeks for my energy levels to get back to baseline without relying on the caffeine substance that I've been using.
Right, if coffee is your only source of caffeine, that would be true. However, many people switch right over to tea or energy drinks or other matcha tea or other stimulant chemicals that are related to adrenaline that have the same effect. So I just want to caution with that. But having done this at least twice in my life, I can tell you for sure that after 6 weeks, energy levels right at waking up and getting started in the day are the same energy levels that you have the rest of the day, unless your adrenals are fatigued. There are other reasons to have fatigue, but from a caffeine perspective, you're back to baseline. And if you then drink 1 cup of coffee that used to give you finally a little energy back up to where you could function, you'll find that for the next 3 or 4 hours, your head is going
Hmm.
because it's overstimulating
Yeah.
a brain that's in a healthy state. So think of caffeine as a caffeine withdrawal drug, and it's good for that. And it's legal, and it's okay. It's socially acceptable. I don't try and get people to stop it, but I tell them if you're having trouble
Just be
sleeping,
aware of, yeah.
A, don't have any caffeine after 10 in the morning, and B, try stopping it entirely and find out if indeed that was part of your sleep
Hmm.
disturbance.
Which, like you said, would take at least 6 weeks to fully understand whether or
Right.
not.
To fully get out from under the fatigue withdrawal symptom of caffeine addiction neurologically will take about 6 weeks.
So it's interesting, just summarize what you're saying. Basically, guys, if I'm having my cup of coffee and I feel like it's not giving that feeling that Dr. Guthrie just mentioned, uh, must be that I am somewhat dependent on caffeine, because for a healthy brain, caffeine will make you feel like you're wired and overstimulated.
None of us were born with a caffeine deficiency in order to stay awake, alert, and functioning.
Hmm.
No one has evolved to that state that I know of. It's
Something.
a it's a simple, common addiction.
Okay, so if I am not getting the proper amount of sleep that I need, what does that do for me outside of just my fatigue? Why do I need good sleep? Like, what happens if, yeah.
Well, we already talked about the effect on the heart and the blood vessels and the
Hmm.
brain, and the overall chronic disease and all-cause mortality risk of inadequate sleep, being defined as less than 6 hours a night, is the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a
A day.
day.
That's wild.
So it depends how long you do it. It depends, how consistently you have poor sleep, but
Hmm.
it's cumulative, lifetime
Hmm.
cumulative.
So, guys, basically, when you're skipping your full night's rest of sleep, recognize that you are slowly poisoning your own body. That's crazy.
Yes. And if it's worth it to you, continue to do so. I celebrate your choices.
I celebrate your choices. I love that. Okay, so let's dive into melatonin.
But before we leave adrenaline, I want to address one other
Please
common source, and that
go ahead.
is what you are reading or what you are watching on television in the hour or two before bedtime. If
Mm,
that's adrenaline rich content, then it will affect your sleep. And I also recommend that you pay bills 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, not right before bedtime, unless paying bills is boring. In
mm.
your financial life, if paying bills is boring, do it whenever you want. It doesn't matter. But if it's stressful, that level of adrenaline can interfere with your sleep.
You know, it's crazy. I've never thought about the order that I do my activities can literally optimize or unoptimize my life. So, to rephrase this again, that's a great tip. Paying bills, if it's something that's stressful or just any stressful activity, don't do it before bedtime, guys. It's not a good move. A lot of people that I know cannot go to sleep without watching a TV show. What do you have to say about that? If I have to listen or be stimulated by something right before I go to bed, is that a
Okay.
red flag?
No, I don't necessarily think so. And I'm one who falls asleep by preference reading.
Mm.
But I have to be careful what I'm reading, right? If it's an
Like,
adrenaline rich content, if I'm reading Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson,
mm,
in the middle of that book, I'm probably not going to fall asleep for hours. I'll just keep reading, right? And I won't get
right.
drowsy. But reading along those lines should be in uh, a room that has low level light, incandescent light, preferably not fluorescent, and certainly not daylight spectrum LED.
Mm,
That's great in the daytime, not great in the evening time. And I think I'm going to segue uh, through this into the melatonin subject.
absolutely. Let's
So,
talk about it.
right. So, that daylight spectrum lighting, that blue end of the light spectrum, is what stimulates your retina to shut down all melatonin production.
Hmm.
Melatonin is your normal natural hormone that makes you drowsy at night. Well, anytime you get high levels of melatonin, it causes drowsiness, but it does more than that. When we first discovered that hormone in the body, we thought we'd found the elixir of life because it
Hmm.
is the hormone. Melatonin is a transmitter, I should say, a neurotransmitter that triggers repair, growth, and replacement in almost every tissue in the whole body. So when we first discovered melatonin, the word on the street was this is going to be the secret to living forever. It didn't turn out quite that magical, but melatonin is important for more than sleep. So melatonin is produced in two parts of your nervous system, the brain up here and the gut. So your gut has its own brain down there, if you would, and about half and half in terms of melatonin production. The brain melatonin production is regulated by light. So when it gets dark or dim and there's less blue light in particular hitting the retina, then the brain begins to produce melatonin. It's time getting on towards time to go to sleep. We're going to start the repair and relaxation and replenishment cycle of our life.
So if I'm watching TV every night before I go to bed and preventing that blue light from
Yeah, so if you want to watch TV right before going to bed, or be on your phone, or be on your laptop, or your iPad, it doesn't matter where the
guilty.
screen comes from. Okay, some screens have a setting for nighttime that takes all the blue out. The whole thing looks yellow-ish,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's designed to keep that blue light from hitting your retina. That's
What
to
about
make
blue
it
light
easy.
blockers? I have blue
You
light
can.
blockers. How are those?
Yeah, if you get those and if you look at your blue light blockers, they're yellow, right? And when you look
Right.
through them, they may have a little pink, but they really should be yellow. Um, yeah, they're blocking the blue light, and yeah, that will give you less blue light hitting your retina while you're looking at the screen.
So
It also
ideally,
makes it also makes pictures look bad and other things look funny, but
I would just altogether not look at a screen how many hours before bed?
probably the last hour and a half, 2 hours, anyways.
Yeah.
And during that time, as you're walking around the house, whatever else it is you're doing, you should be gradually turning the lights down.
So ideally, we would all get off our phones 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. But knowing myself and some of our bad habits, if I am going to choose to scroll on my phone at night, or I have to get work done on my laptop, or I'm deciding to watch an episode of my favorite show before I go to bed, I should at least wear blue light blockers or turn it on a lower
Correct.
setting.
Yeah, or turn it on a setting that blocks the blue light coming through.
Mm-hmm.
And most phones now have those settings, most laptops and iPads
Mm-hmm.
do.
And we don't have to go into this too in depth, but I think that this actually hits on a deeper issue. I think a lot of times we need constant stimulation. Like for the viewer listening, when was the last time that you actually did turn off your screens before 2 hours before you went to bed? For some of us, we wouldn't even know what to do with ourselves if we turned our phones off. And I think starting this practice, not only will it be good for our sleep, but starting this practice can also be a self-challenge journey of learning to be present with yourself and coming in touch with how was your day. Maybe take that moment as a check-in period to just unplug, disconnect, and come back in tune with your body, occupy your body, and actually take a second to be present with yourself, which I think for a lot of us would have benefits mentally way beyond just our sleep. um,
Absolutely. Another time, maybe we could talk about the life cost of technology addiction. It's very
Next
real.
episode.
There's plenty. Yeah, great. Let someone else deal with that subject. I'm not an expert, but
Yeah.
if you want to amplify the brain change and help your sleep, spend the time that you would have that last 30 minutes before going to bed instead of scrolling through things.
Hmm.
Sit down with a pencil and paper and write out 10 or 15 things that you are grateful for
Hmm.
in that
That
day.
alone, gratitude alone, and incorporating that into your routine can do wonders for your health.
It changes your brain waves, and we can measure it on EEG. We can just watch it
Wow.
happen in terms of electrical activity, and it sets you up for parasympathetic tone, which is where you're going to be spending most of your sleep time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible. Okay, let's move on to the next subject.
No,
So
we're not done with
we're
melatonin
not.
yet.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were still on it. Okay, keep going. My bad.
Oh, remember, we've only talked about half of the melatonin production,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
take it away.
Right.
Take it away, Dr. Guthrie. So, what were we talking about before this?
The other half of melatonin production is done in the gut. And it's very important not to forget that because the nerve cells in your gut brain, and your gut brain is not quite as massive as the one up here in the skull, but it weighs nearly as much when you add it all up. Um, it is producing melatonin only in a fasting state. So
Hmm.
those nerve cells, if they are processing food information, are not making melatonin. you will lose half of your melatonin production if your gut is not in a fasting state. Now, how long does it take to get in a fasting state? From the last thing you ate, it takes, depending on the person, between 3 and 6 hours to get in a fasting state.
So that means that 3 to 6 hours before bedtime, I should stop eating.
Right. And if you're a slow processor, my gut is a slow processor. It always has been since I can remember. But if I eat a full meal after 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that night's sleep will not be as deep. I will waken less rested. It doesn't mean I didn't sleep, but I pay attention so that I actually notice a difference. So for me, and my bedtime is 10 o'clock. So for me, it actually takes close to 8 hours from the last food until going to bed if I want to have the deepest rest in my sleep.
So, guys, if you're someone who wakes up consistently during the night, can't wake up feeling energized, you might want to consider, are you a late night snacker? Are you someone who at it hits 10, it hits midnight, and you're opening the fridge, you're seeing what's left over? You might want to skip that late night meal. But Dr. Guthrie, if this has been a habit for me, if I have just made a consistent habit of grabbing a snack late at night from the fridge and turning on my favorite show without using blue light, without putting this on, like, what have I been doing health wise? What is the damage that I'm doing to myself?
Remember, I said melatonin is not just about falling asleep, because anyone will tell you that if I eat a high carb snack right before bed, it helps me fall asleep. And it does. It helps you fall asleep with half of your normal amount of melatonin, so you're losing half of the regenerative, restorative benefit of that neurotransmitter that's supposed to be helping you heal and rebuild during the night. And you won't waken as rested
Mm-hmm.
because your brain hasn't had as much healing, your body hasn't had as much healing. You won't waken as rested, even though you fell asleep and maybe stayed asleep all night.
So just because I have slept a certain duration of time does not mean that I got good sleep or that my
Correct.
body is actually in a restorative state healing itself. Yeah,
Generally speaking,
that's
if when
crazy.
I wake up after 8 hours of sleep, I wake up bright, alert, full of energy, ready to go, right as my feet swing out of the bed and hit the floor, I probably had a good night's sleep. But if you don't, just having been unconscious for 8 hours doesn't guarantee the
Mm-hmm.
benefit.
So to increase your melatonin production, you can stop eating 3 to 6 hours before bedtime. Um, we talked about blue light, but now explain to me, what about supplements? What if, like, if I'm taking melatonin before I go to sleep, does that mean that I can afford to maybe keep a little bit more blue light? I mean, sorry, keep more screen time before I go to sleep. Does it offset itself? What does this mean?
Right, right. And it is a valid question. It's a question to which we actually do not have a scientific answer, as far as I know.
Hmm.
No one has designed a study whereby you purposefully live in ways that disrupt your melatonin production, and then you take melatonin and then measure to see if your sleep structure is normal. Chances are you won't get it right. Now, the normal dose that people take of melatonin is between 1 and 3 milligrams. Some people take up to 6 milligrams. The amount of melatonin that your body produces is measured in micrograms, not milligrams, a thousand fold lower. So the production that goes directly through your bloodstream into your brain is going to be different levels, and hitting that right. So the next question, of course, well, does it hurt if I take too much? I mean, can I hurt myself with
Yeah.
melatonin?
And do I
Well,
need
no,
to
you
supplement? Does
right.
everyone need to supplement melatonin?
Whether you come from a creation design standpoint or an evolution standpoint, nobody needs to supplement melatonin. We're supposed to make our own, and we're supposed to make as much as we need, unless we're screwing it up. Now, uh, maybe the other side of the question you didn't ask is, if I'm screwing up my melatonin, do I need to take some? Yeah, probably. Yeah, but it would be better.
Do you take melatonin before you go to sleep?
No, not on a regular basis,
Mhm.
because long-term safety of melatonin has not been studied. We don't
Hmm.
know. And we do know that there are any number of neurotransmitters and hormones in the body that if you don't have enough, it's not a good thing. If we give you a supplement and get you up to normal levels, that's a good thing. And if you get too much, it's another bad thing, and maybe worse than
There's
the
a
not
fine
enough,
line, right?
right? So um, the it takes a bit of hubris to think that I'm going to get it right
Hmm.
better than my evolution or creation the space put me
So,
in to start with, right? So,
sorry
but
for
yes,
interrupting. Go back to the other. Yeah, go
I do
ahead.
have melatonin on my shelf. I
For
take
when
it
you need
sometimes.
it. Yeah.
Yes, when I have eaten late at night and I'm not going to, I can lay there and think I'm just not feeling it tonight. Yeah, I'll
Hmm.
go take melatonin. If I ate chocolate too late in the day, because remember, chocolate contains theobromine, which metabolizes to
Hmm.
caffeine. So if I've had chocolate after 2 in the afternoon, then I'll probably be taking melatonin that night because otherwise I'm gonna have trouble falling asleep.
Absolutely. And even like you said, even if I'm not having trouble falling asleep, that doesn't mean that it's not going to affect the quality of my sleep and the
Correct.
restoration of my body. So what about sleep hygiene? Let's talk about this practically. We've talked about light, we've talked about not eating too late, but tell us a little bit more about how we can keep good sleep hygiene to optimize our life.
Right. So if you're having trouble sleeping and you've optimized your melatonin, you've optimized your adrenaline through the means that we've talked about, but you're still having trouble, there's some other things to think about. The air, sleep is best when the air is cold and fresh. Okay, so cold air, fresh air. For most people, that means opening a window and having a some sort of a blanket comforter situation that'll keep you warm while your air that you're breathing in is cool. How cold? I don't know of any
How
solid
cold is too
numbers.
cold? It's interesting so much on preference. Like I personally I know sleeping cold is better for you, and I have a hard time doing it. When I'm cold, I can't fall asleep very easily,
No, I can't fall asleep at all when I'm cold. You
right?
should never be cold when you're falling asleep. The air should be cold
The air should be okay, but
as
you
it
should be
comes
warm with
in.
the blanket.
You
Okay.
should be warm. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, personally, I'm not a big sheet and blanket fan. We use down comforters, and we
Hmm.
have a summer one and a winter one, and you can stay plenty warm.
Yeah.
If you've ever done any camping or backpacking and slept in a -20 down bag at 0 degrees, you sleep deep and well because you're toasty warm
Hmm.
and the air you're breathing
Air
is
is breathing
cold.
is cold. What is it about cold air that is good for you when you sleep?
I've not heard an adequate physiologic explanation as to why that's true, but
But it just
you'll
is.
find it in pretty much all the sleep
Cool.
literature.
Yeah.
Second thing to look at is probably light in the room.
Hmm.
Most of us have a clock in the room. If that clock has green or blue numbers instead of red numbers, then you're getting blue wavelength light, which will be disturbing to some degree. Some
Hmm.
people are very light sensitive. So it's best to have lights off in the bedroom, a dark bedroom, which means this far north in the summertime, if you're having difficulty sleeping for 8 hours, having a way to have dark when it's not dark out.
So why do some people feel like they need light when they sleep? I know people who can't sleep without a nightlight. Is that disrupting their sleep?
It is disrupting their sleep. There's no doubt about it. You asked a different question, which was why do they need light? You'd have to ask their limbic system, the fight, flight, freeze savior of mankind that is in our lizard brain,
Hmm.
that tells us danger, danger. But that is probably, and there may be some early childhood things, there may be some things learned from watching their parents. There's all kind of reasons, but it really should be dark. Um, if uh, you want to try and have dark sleep, but not trip over things at night, having a nightlight that has a dark shade over the top of it so it lights
Hmm.
only the floor is a good starting point.
Hmm.
And sleeping with a sleeping mask makes your eyes dark until you pull it up. If you need to get out of bed and go do something, or you want
Mm-hmm.
to see something, you can pull it up and look, and then put it back down. And in the summertime, that's what I do. I have a mask by my bed, and at about 4 o'clock between sleep cycles, when I wake up, I put the mask on because it's going to be light soon, and I don't want to be awake. So the next thing that will tend to disturb people's sleep is noise. And different people are more visually sensitive and more auditorily sensitive. So you'll know who you are, which thing disturbs you more. But if noises tend to keep you awake, then having white noise in the room to generate just a noisy background that is constant is a great way to keep those things from disturbing your sleep. The next area to look at, if you're still having trouble with sleep, is to look for electromagnetic frequency radiation in your bedroom. Now, the most common source of that is your phone, because as you said, most people want to go to sleep with their phone and wake up with their phone.
Mm.
The
It's like
phone
an
really,
emotional attachment. Like people like
uh,
sleep right next to it. And, yeah.
and I've spent a number of years doing that myself. My new habit that has been now for the last 5 or 10 years, my phone sleeps out in the kitchen. That's
Hmm.
where the charger
So
is.
do you have
That's
an
where,
actual alarm clock in your room?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a clock with numbers. And because I've been too cheap to buy a new one, the current one has green numbers, but it ought to have red numbers.
Today's podcast is brought to you by the Premium Center for Regenerative Medicine and Stem Cell Therapy in the Northwest, Northwest Center for Regenerative Medicine. Get back to the activities that you love without needing surgery. You can book your appointment at nwc4rm.com. Again, that's nwc4rm.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Rare Wellness Supplements. You can head over to rareplanethealth.com to get your supplements. My personal favorite is the premium fish oil filled with omega 3s. Again, you can go to rareplanethealth.com and get the supplements that you most need to support your health and wellness today. Lastly, this podcast is also brought to you by Rare Wellness. Rare Wellness is located on the South Hill in Spokane and is one center that provides all the wellness tools that you could need. Whether you're looking for a hands-on premium intimate yoga studio with a therapeutic emphasis, bar classes, Tai Chi classes, if you're looking for skincare treatments, injectable, hydrofacial, microneedling, organic spa treatments, if you're wanting to get therapeutic massage or book functional medicine appointments to get down to the root cause of your inflammation, Rare Wellness is the place for you. Whatever your wellness needs are, they have it covered. So to book your appointment today, go to rarewellness.com. Again, go to rarewellness.com and mention this podcast for 10% off when you're booking. Okay, time to get back to the episode. Okay, I've also seen this trend online where people are switching out their bedroom lights to be red. Is red light going to help them fall asleep? And is that something that, if you're really into biohacking or looking to optimize your life, is that worth it?
No, I'm not aware of any wavelength of light that helps you fall asleep. Um, the normal sleep cycle uh, probably, considering where civilization began, as far as we know it historically, is equatorial. So there's not a lot of difference between spring and summer, and you sleep when it's dark and you're awake when it's not dark.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not aware of any wavelength of light that's helpful for
Helpful.
falling asleep. But if you have to have light, red is the least disruptive. It's at the
Okay.
farthest end away from the blue,
Mm-hmm.
which is the one that's going to stimulate you to
Yeah,
wakefulness.
love it. Was there more on sleep hygiene that we wanted to cover?
Well, the electromagnetic frequency,
Oh,
I
yes, please.
touched on the phone. Wi-Fi. Some people are sensitive enough to Wi-Fi that they can actually sense it, and those people probably should turn their house Wi-Fi off during the night. Um, and then there are a few people, it's not common, but there are a few people who are sensitive to electromagnetic radiation coming off of, and I'll put it in quotations, dirty sockets. That
Mm.
is, you have a wire coming in and a couple of plugs and some wires going around, and there's solid contact and not quite solid contact. There's a fair amount of electromagnetic frequency that radiates out when the contact is not great. And I've known a few patients that had to actually get a meter to test the amount of radiation coming out of the plugs, and then use
Wow.
a remedial plug that kind of fixes all that, or have an electrician come in and address it, to get their sleep back to normal. And one place to think about if you're having trouble sleeping is there a dimmer switch near where you sleep that's dimmed? Because when you dim a dimmer switch, you create a very significant outflow of radiation, electromagnetic radiation, because of the way that dimming works on a dimmer
Mm.
switch.
Wow, so many hacks. This is one of the things that I love about functional medicine is that it's about optimizing your life. We're not just looking at how to get you to survival level, but I mean, I would never think about half of the things that you've mentioned as things that can affect my sleep. And then if I don't get the right amount of sleep, like you said at the beginning, I'm literally slowly killing myself. That's crazy. Okay, so there's so much more that we can go over when it comes to sleep and optimizing our lifestyle so that we can get the proper amount of sleep. But we're going to do a separate episode on that. Dr. Guthrie, we end every episode with just a practical tip that our listeners can take and start applying to their life today. So if someone was going to start trying to get their sleep in order, what is one thing that they should start doing today?
Of course, we've talked about a number of simple things that are critical, but one that we haven't talked about that I think is a very important one is the subject of alcohol. It's easy to think of alcohol as something that helps you sleep, but alcohol, as long as it's being processed in your system, completely disrupts your normal sleep structure.
Hmm.
It does it at the same as we earlier discussed sleep medications will do. And so any alcohol that you're going to consume really should be completely processed out of your system before you lay down to sleep. And by that, I mean your blood alcohol level should be zero,
Wow.
which, as you know, is any number of hours depending on how much you've been drinking. So
So if you're
do
gonna
your
drink,
do
do
your
it as
drinking at
soon as you
lunch.
wake up. That's that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So
if you're going to drink and you have sleep troubles, drink at lunch or
or
drink a
just don't.
glass of wine with dinner, but have dinner at 4 in the afternoon or 5.
And even still, it's probably not going to be all the way down to zero by the time you fall asleep.
One glass of wine, probably, but
Okay.
three,
Yeah,
probably not. Yeah.
probably not. Okay, well, thank you so much, Dr. Guthrie. I always love talking to you. I feel like I learned so much. For all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for listening to this podcast. And I hope that you learned something that is going to be able to optimize your life and just give you the tools that you need to thrive. DM us on Instagram with your questions. We're going to start incorporating that into the next episode. So, really excited to hear what questions you guys have for us to ask the experts. And next time we talk to you, Dr. Guthrie, we're probably going to have some. So I'm excited to explore that. Again, be sure to subscribe, to follow, guys. Dr. Guthrie, thank you so much for joining me on this episode.